Thanks, Sally. First up, approval of minutes from January 27th. Any questions or comments of minutes?
Do we post the minutes somewhere?
I don't know, but we certainly can host them on the website.
Mm-hmm.
Sally might remember, but I seem to remember seeing something in the statute about making information available.
Yeah,
good
I think we
practice.
should have that on our website.
Yeah, it's good practice.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep.
Take a motion to approve.
Approve minutes as
Second.
provided.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you all. Financial report, Matthew.
Yeah, so we sent out some initial budget updates. Maybe start a little bit backwards. We entered into a contract with the town of Rockland to use Megan Beckett as our financial officer. She's in the office 1 day a week on Fridays, and she has spent the last few, since I've been here, putting together our receipts and our budgets and comparing that to our budgets for the last 9 months. And so what you see in front of you that I sent out in an email are expenses and revenues through the end of March. It's not by any means a final piece yet, because we're still pulling together materials related to our loan funds and some other bank accounts that we need to do some additional research. But what you can see there is the fact that we hadn't billed for roughly $157,000, primarily EDA, but some other funds as well, some communities that we haven't addressed in our dues relationship, and then some other smaller items. So we're in the process of putting together all of those bills and reports that really go back to March of last year. And we hope to have all of that billing out and accounted for by the end of next week. It includes also doing some reporting, some quarterly reporting to EDA, some quarterly reporting to both the EDA supplemental and the EDA regular program, which we're working on right now and taking care of. But for the most part, financially, we're in good shape. And, you know, I can talk about that in terms of the audit as well.
Really?
Matthew, well, I'm glad Rockland is always on your mind. I don't think your contract is with Rockland. Who's the contract?
Oh, it's Rockport. Did I say Rockland? Sorry.
I thought so.
Yep. Nope. Sorry.
That's all right.
We appreciate Rockland's help too, Julie.
Yeah. I'm glad he's thinking of us.
I try to think about everyone.
Any other questions on financials? Committee updates. I think the hiring committee is good with its update.
Hey, Mark, can I go backwards once more
sure.
on the audit? I don't
Yeah, do you want to touch
to
base on that a little more?
Yeah, yep, I do. So we met with the auditors for the third time this morning, and they have actually reconstructed our books from 2016 through to June 31st of last year. And we're feeling pretty good about it. Right now, their balance is showing $157,000 in the black at the end of last year. And we know that that's probably, again, because of the way we failed to bill EDA, that's probably closer to around 217 to 220 in the black. The big piece, we've got two pieces that are unknowns. One is just we all of the grants and loans that we did for the Recovery Act, we need to document all that for the audit. And so we're beginning to send electronically all of that material to the auditors so that they can capture that. The other thing is that we're, in the same comment about the budget, we're teasing out the loans, the loan programs, or the balances we have to figure out what balances are actually ours and what balances are loan reserves and what balances are actually loan monies that we have to loan out. We know built in there somewhere are fees that we haven't taken out and didn't have a structure to take those fees out. So we hope to tease all of that out and have an audit ready that we can give to rural development and to the state agencies that are looking for it by the middle of May. And our auditors are feeling pretty good about that. As you may have expected, we'll be spending additional money. Our original contract was for $4,000. We'll be spending another $6,000 because it will require a single audit for the last 2 years because of the amount of money that we had come in and out. So I've already given the go-ahead on this is a question, is that okay for me to do? To go ahead and give me a contract to amend that contract to do that work. Now I'm finished with the financial piece, Mark.
Appreciate that, Matthew. Any other finances related questions? Committee reports.
Do you want me to give a bylaws committee report?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So we are at the point, I was not at the last meeting, but where we have a draft that we feel comfortable with and that we've incorporated what we feel were the mission from the retreat, the board retreat. And we've looked at a bunch of different examples of bylaws that were COGs and kind of simplified things. We also have this draft that we feel like there needs to be a little bit more work and oversight by an attorney because there's some things that we just want to make sure are done correctly. This has brought up a lot of questions about a whole range of things that I talked a little bit to Matt about, but also Brian Dankos. One of the things that we were concerned about is since we have the two entities, we don't want to have any issues with not being able to go forward on certain things like with EDA. We don't want any confusion there. It seems to be that we could keep those two entities intact. And Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but for the short term, we could keep those two entities intact until we close out some of these things that Matt was talking about with other sources of funds that we're going to be wrapping up working with. But we also we're operating now, officially as MCOG, but we just want to make sure we don't have any issues with EDA. And of course, Alan Brigham's retiring. So one of the things I was hoping we could do is that we can have a meeting with the new person as soon as possible so that there's no delay for when we put in these grants. I know Brunswick's going to try to put one in this summer. And I'm sure others are as well, given there's all this money available. We want to be able to move pretty quickly. So one of the things that Brian brought up earlier in the week to me is that, so MCOG is legally existing, but it's not in good standing. And I think it's not in good standing because our resident agent is no longer on our board. So we were talking about, is it possible that we can get moving on that right away to get us in good legal standing? And we're wondering, I know I see Betty's on here, so her video's not on, but whether it should be our secretary that is that resident agent. I don't know what the group feels about this, but that's something that I wanted to bring up for some discussion.
Sally, if I can add just a little bit to that. I have reached out to Shanna Mueller. We thought, given the complexities of what was going on, we thought a different legal team might be called for at this point, and a fresh set of eyes on what we're trying to do, particularly this link between the Economic Development District and COG, because I think we need to actually keep portions of how our money flows from EDA to us intact, but we think it can sit behind the COG organization and be named out that way in the bylaws. So Shannon was on vacation last week, and I'm expecting a contact back from her any day now, and
Great.
we'll begin to talk to her about how to properly go forward.
Yeah, she's excellent. We work with her a lot, so that's really good news that we're going to bring her on. And so, do we have? I know you, Matt, you and I talked a little bit. We have a line item that we can build for a legal line item. That
We have professional services, and
Okay.
we have some adequate funds in that. I think as I guess I've said it in the interview, so that wasn't really official. So I'll say it now. What we're going to try to do is really invest in cleaning up the details of our operation and putting the structure in place so that we can go forward confidently.
Right.
And
It's essential.
yeah,
It all goes back to our bylaws, to the
Yes.
bylaws and how
that's
we're
the
set up.
start of it. That's the
Yeah.
start of it.
So that these are all inextricably linked, but I just think if we can clean up some of these things, and we'll have peace of mind as we go forward with, on these various grant applications, that we've got the structure in place and we're not going to have any issues there. So I think that should be really on top of our minds and getting that cleaned up. So thank you, Matt, for starting on that process and running down whether we have a line item and money to spend towards that. It'll be money well spent. So that was really all that I had just on the bylaws, is that, once we get that legal review, and we were thinking that we would get this in a shape and work towards the General Assembly meeting. Is that June? I don't know what the exact date is, but we should work towards that. I think that would be, I think we could do that. I think it's doable, assuming we
June
can get
23rd,
that review.
I believe.
I'm sorry,
I think it's June 23rd is
June
the,
23rd. Okay.
What's the normal notification for that, Mark? How many do you try to get that out with reminders starting a month ahead of time and then to wind it down to something that's a formal?
I don't think we've been nearly as formal. We've had conversations about this, the benefits of looking at the General Assembly in the future of doing it, having it be more of an event than it has been in the past. But I think that keeping it in front of people with it, at least that first month out, and then formal invitation sounds great.
Okay.
And we can talk a little more about that. I do think that's something that if we can do so and people feel comfortable with it, would be a good opportunity to have people in person and participating in some capacity.
And my assumption, that's also, so we could potentially have the bylaws, we would have the budget for next year. And we certainly could focus in the General Assembly on the future of the COG, and wake people up a little bit in terms of what we're trying to do.
Exactly.
Yep.
So maybe I'll wait until we have an open thing. I was just going to ask about how we can facilitate that meeting with the new EDA rep.
For the General Assembly meeting?
Well, I think we need to have a number of us, I think should, be introduced, or at least have some.
Oh, we can set that up. Yeah, but we've just gotten clarification of who it's going to be and how the system is going to work.
Okay.
And I'll have Brian get something out, and we can certainly try to set up a meeting. But it's not. I don't think it's final yet. Certainly our contact is through our grant programs, which is David Cohen. He's going to stay, and he sounds like he's going to step in to a certain extent to replace Alan. But there's also a tag teaming that's going to go on, and we've heard in some cases where we might actually have the Region 1 director as our direct liaison. So.
And who is that? I can't remember. It's
Oh God, you're gonna ask
the
me.
lady,
Marjorie.
Marjorie, right?
Marjorie something.
Matthew, is that a temporary thing, not a permanent thing?
I can't answer that question yet.
Okay,
I really can't. It sounds like they're scrambling a little bit to figure out how they're going to do it. They did add another staff person into the mix that would help cover Allen's region rather than him doing it by himself. So we kind of thought that she's relatively new and that she would be the one that would step up, but I think they're doing it gradually.
Well, that would be helpful because we had actually a meeting with some of us and Max was on there. I was on there, a few others with the Brookings Institute was tasked with kind of looking to how to make EDA more effective, given that all this money is out there. And so
Yeah.
one of the things, one of our biggest things that we suggested was more staff.
Yeah.
And so that's nice. If they're going to bring if they're going to have more than one person for that region, that would be really helpful. So I hope that is going to happen.
Sally, spot on. It's amazing with all the resources that EDA is being offered to provide services, and they're just so incredibly understaffed.
Right.
It just seems such a flawed model. These poor people that are trying to, organize this whole process to distribute funds, et cetera, and they're just overwhelmed.
Oh, yeah. And they were already overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
this is just making it that much worse. Audra, I'm looking at you, wondering about the General Assembly and the great retreat place that we met at, and wondering if that could be a place for, I think we mentioned that day about how that might be a nice place for it.
Sure, if everyone's willing to come this far north again, we can make it available. I do have to, I think I'll have to check and see if interferes with summer camp.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. If we're going to meet in person, we probably should work on a place pretty quickly.
Yeah.
If it's June 23rd.
But I'll certainly ask and email Matt back
Okay.
by the end of the day about it.
Great. Thank you.
it really is a great location.
Where was it?
If we get our EDA grant, it could be even better.
You're doing some renovation or hoping to?
Camden Snowball, man.
Okay.
It's supposed to
Well,
be.
when you said that, I knew.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're supposed to do some renovations or something?
Oh, it's the vision was like a whole event center out there.
Nice.
So it could be more of like a 4-season recreation event destination. And actually the reason I'm in Camden is because that didn't happen the first time around when it was supposed to. So this,
Good luck. That would be great.
Max helped us take advantage of this most recent round of funding to see if we could finish what was started back in 2014.
Nice. I think Maine should apply for funds for a 5 seasons resort,
Yeah.
not a 4 season, 5 season, just to see if anyone.
But the rainy
picks up.
mud season too?
Absolutely.
I was gonna say, I'd figure you need a grant after this year's toboggan championships to rework
fix that
the parking
field.
lots that were
Oh my gosh.
mud pits.
Mud wrestling,
Brutal complaints about
and-
that.
mid-coast mud wrestling.
Sally, anything else bylaws, or did we cover?
Nothing else on the bylaws. No.
Okay, great.
So I'll just wait to hear, I guess we'll just wait to hear from you, Matt, about
Yep.
next steps. And if you want to have our team on a call with Shauna, that'd be great too.
I think that probably makes
Yeah.
the next step.
Okay.
And I have to actually talk with Shauna later today, so I'm happy to just make sure she saw the email or the inquiry.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
MCOG activities.
So the first one is the most obvious thing is as we work through things is our personnel rules don't work anymore. Everything that we're doing just remotely is inconsistent. My favorite line in the whole thing is it is incumbent upon the employee to get to work in inclement weather if the school system has not canceled work. So That's how much of an update we need to really think about. My question to you is, do you want a group that is, sorry for that. Do you want a group from the executive committee that's working with me on that? Or would you like us to just bring a draft to the executive committee and do it that way?
I see some head nods on the do a draft and bring it back to the executive committee and feel comfortable with what you can review and then bring forward with what will work with current staffing and what you'd like to see moving forward.
Okay, we will do that. The second piece is, I wanted to discuss with you today. First, while I talked about things not getting done, Brian Dankos did an outstanding job keeping this organization running for 9 months. And I having known Brian, I am pleased to say that he's certainly proven his worth. And structurally, we're thinking about doing a couple different things. One is moving Brian to deputy director and setting his salary at 67.5. He's at 62 as a business officer. His primary focus would be on business development and managing the EDA program with the rest of staff. And that would free me up to focus more on a lot of the planning and state-run programs and housing and just a whole bunch of different aspects that come into play. He likes that idea. I like that idea. I don't know what the formal process is for doing that, but I would like to make that so and go forward. The second part of the discussion is we've moved Hannah into an administrative role. In interviewing her, actually long before I started, she really said that she wanted to do administrative work. And as I shared with Mark at our lunch, that's a godsend if someone wants to do administrative work, but she wants to learn grant management and grant programming. So it's a great experience for her. She's real quick. She's able to pick this stuff up. She got a couple of our bills out right away and she's ready to launch on the EDA stuff. Now we just have some reports to do in advance of that. So we'll be sliding her into an administrative position. And it's still a part-time position. She's still at 20 hours a week. We'll see what happens. But I think I'll have a year's worth of her time to begin to solidify that so that we have one person in the office that's responsible for making sure that all these quarterly reports and all these things are taken care of. I'll oversee that, but I think having a person doing that is an important piece. But I don't know whether there's an action that's needed to move Brian into deputy director or whether that's something that's within my purview. And I'll leave that to you folks.
Valerie?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think both of those are excellent moves for the organization. I think Brian focusing on the loans and managing that process, he's really good at it. He's very accessible, does free you up to be able to do the things you need to do. It's a very wide range of things that the organization needs to be doing. So having him focused on that would be great. Plus his long-term, he's been there for a while, and I think it's going to be helpful to everybody. And then having that administrative role, I think is great. Does the salary seems like at a good range from my perspective. I wanted to get other people's opinion and just wondering where that comes from, if we have enough to kind of do that. And would Hannah stay at the same salary? Those are my two questions.
I don't have an answer for you yet on Hannah, because I don't really understand that salary structure yet. I'm still trying to figure out what it is that, I've got an idea of what people are making. She's under $20 an hour. So that I need to think that through before I give an answer to that. With Brian, he was making 72 something as the acting director He was making 62 before that. We picked a midpoint, no more magic than that. The same for me that it was for you, the 67.5 seemed like what I know people are making out in that field right now. And you know, the talent that Brian brings to deal making is hard to find.
Yeah.
So you know, it's definitely not something I want to lose.
He has those relationships.
Yeah.
I think a key component to right now to try and keep things moving in a positive direction is retention of key staff, so that they feel valued and that they move forward aggressively with goals that you're working with them on, Matt. So as Sally is alluding to, Brian has relationships and in the region and is known and I believe is respected. And I think under your guidance, I think Brian will be able to hopefully achieve some other things as well in this new role that he would have. That's my 2 cents.
Julie?
I'm really happy to see some recognition for Brian and his capabilities. I'd love to see a job description for what you envision for that role and how it would be focused. I would say loan portfolio is one piece, but by no means all that we could be doing in the economic development and business support realm. So I'd love to see your vision for that and how it can be picked up in this position more specifically.
Good call, Julie.
Yes, thank you, Julie. And I guess what else I'll do, I think job descriptions are a really good idea. I was thinking that in terms of redoing the bylaws. But thank you for mentioning that. I'll make that effort combined and we'll work on that pretty quickly.
No problem. It seems like, thinking about when you asked what should this committee's role be, Audra can speak to or Mark on what it officially is. To me, it seems like it's the job description and the budget approval for whatever it is you want to do, but the, recommendation on staff capabilities would be yours. And I don't know if others agree with that.
Audra, I saw you in.
Well, I was thinking probably like even higher level. So Matt's redoing the personnel policy. And I think that, supporting him to kind of set up the organization, how he thinks it's going to best run, and just giving the executive director that flexibility to do that into the future, I think could be built into, a revised personnel policy. And that's something that I would support because, staff change, the organization changes, needs change, priorities change. And I think that, having the executive director having that flexibility to, make changes to job descriptions and, personnel and that sort of thing is important. I know, in my role, that's something that, I have the flexibility to do. And I'd say it's probably similar of all the other managers. And that's really, it's important if you're going to be sort of nimble and responsive to, the priorities that you have in front of you and the resources that you have in front of you. So I don't know if anybody else feels the same way, but I think as Matt's going through the personnel policy, building in that sort of ability will be helpful, not only now while he's, trying to rework how the organization is going to be structured, but also into the future.
And I think that I'd agree with that, Audra, in moving forward. And Julie, you're right. I think the budget component's the role that, we end up having as the executive committee in reviewing this process. I do appreciate though, Matthew, and I think it's important moving forward as you evaluate the staffing and put together policy. As staffing change or needs or things like that, having an explanation and knowing who we're going to for what and who's performing what function there is with the organization, I think is very important for the communities and the business community to be able to know who they're reaching out to and how who the points of contacts are, because that's been, I think, a challenge in the past. We started to identify individual people who we could go to for things, but they weren't necessarily, who should be a primary handling something. So Julia, I saw your hand up and then Sal.
Yeah, I'd say I agree to a point, and I wonder if there's a hybrid. So I agree completely that a chief executive needs flexibility and so forth, and is in the best position to judge what's needed and who's a fit with those capabilities. I would say though, in my few years here, we've added positions where I haven't had a good understanding of what those positions are, what they do, what's expected of them, how they contribute to the mission, what we're looking for in a skill set. And I think as an executive committee, those are probably things we should know, even whether or not we're voting on them. So I wonder if there is a hybrid here that is appropriate, where there's flexibility in the personnel policy for the director, but there's also some role or nod for or at least understanding of the executive committee on what we're staffing for and why and how it fits with what we're trying to accomplish together.
I would completely agree with that, Julie. And I think informing the board more than less is what really needs to happen here. I think the other part of it is, frankly, some of the staff are kind of confused as to what they were doing as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the one thing that they have all told me is that they are really looking forward to structure. Over and over and over again, that's what they're looking forward to. So everything that we've said and identified here, and I think the bylaw exercise is a good way to capture all of that. That's how I'll think about doing that, and we'll try to get some stuff out to you relatively quickly, because I think that's something we have to get a handle on as we think about the budget. You know, you've got to think about how we're looking at staffing and what the roles of that staff. I mean, I don't need to repeat everything that was just said, but that's the purpose of this exercise.
Sally?
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you to Audra for bringing that up, because I do think that we need to empower our top position to be able to be flexible that way, as you're in this every single day and you know the needs and you know the skill sets. But I like the idea of having the board really understanding what people do. I know when I've talked to other board members just at these meetings, and people still don't know what we do and what we can offer them. So I think this is a perfect time. We're rebranding ourselves to be able at that General Assembly really boil it down what these changes are, so that and what we actually do and what we can provide to our members. So I think it would be great to have like almost a little organization around this meeting and what we all want to accomplish, and then figure out a presentation that, you know, is really interactive and, you know, that really gets to what we're trying to communicate about the rebranding.
Nice.
I'd add a great summary. Sally, I'd also add that, and if it was already mentioned, my apologies. I think our website needs to reflect these changes when staffing changes happen, or titles, whatever, and responsibility. Again, that has to be up there so people can click and find things on their own, so that our webpage becomes more of an accurate source of information about the organization.
So that's a good thing. Maybe that could be, is that a Hannah? Is that an administrative, so that we could keep that could be one of her duties, maybe, is to keep that updated?
Well, let me jump to D, the community engagement, because I keep the conversation moving. That's exactly what we're thinking. That's part of that administrative role. Okay. And there are two things that we're asking her to do. In fact, we're going to launch something this week. We're going to start doing at least a monthly email blast. We've been spending the last week putting together all our email lists and consolidating them down into one place so that we can reach out to all the communities and tell them what we're doing, kind of share our story with them. And that will be a vehicle to begin to share all of those things. That's going to be posted on the website. Right now, Max is the only one that really has been working on the website. We'd like to get Hannah trained up in doing that and make that a much more interactive, informative website that we can begin to put out information. And we also can post some really interesting and good meetings. Next week, the governor's office is doing the main economic recovery, an update of that program. Now, we've all been to a couple of those meetings. Sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not. But I have a feeling this one is going to be useful, and that may be something that communities want to attend. So we want to get in a position where we not only can do a regular monthly or bi-monthly, we haven't made up our minds as to whether or not we have enough information to send out more. We already dismiss once a week. And we're trying to figure out whether it's once a month or something like that, what most of the other regional organizations do. But we also have the capacity when there's some blast that needs to get out right away that we can do that. And then melding that all with the website and the one thing I told my staff, I said, you guys got to have pictures of the region as opposed to those cut and paste stuff. We need to populate the website so it looks like us. And it begins to tell a story of us. So to your points, that is what we're trying to do, and those are the two pieces that Hannah is really going to be in charge of: grant administration and this community engagement piece.
I just wanted to add one thing to that, if I may. So a perfect example is that I got Brian sent a notification of a grant, a really great grant opportunity that I thought would be great for our marine resources, but it came and it was due in like a few days. Unfortunately, I sent it out to them and they had already seen it and they had already submitted. But if there's a way to figure out, I know it's hard. They don't give any of us a lot of time to respond to these things. It's really ridiculous, the turnaround time sometimes that we have to get in these grants. But if there's a way to do these blasts more frequently, so that we can just get them out to who we need to get them out to, so we don't miss opportunities. And if somebody's focused on that, if it's Hannah or somebody else, that would be really helpful.
I think part of it is being recognized as a primary TA provider for the region, which we were not. And so we weren't necessarily getting notices or any kind of consolidated notice. We're in terms of new TA programs, we're going to be recognized as a municipal planning assistance program for the comp plan program. We're going to get a grant for the coastal communities program. We're waiting to see what comes out with this whole new housing program and housing legislation, but we know that there will be funding for that. As we begin to be recognized, those agencies that are putting out those notices will send them to us.
Yeah, that'd be.
And we'll be a primary receiver of that information.
Well, that's interesting to know that we weren't already getting those. Yeah. So that.
Well, if they were, it was not directly. We're not on anybody's direct email list, and so we've talked about that as staff too, to figure out how we can consolidate that. We haven't specified that person. We know that how we'll get that word out is through Hannah.
Do you really mean, sorry, finish first, please.
No, I'm good.
Did you really mean coastal communities program? Because I've been watching for that grant program, which has been late. Or do you mean?
Yes, it is late, isn't it? I actually sent out an email today to Judy finding out what was going on.
Yeah, if you find out, I'd love to know. And so did you really mean that you're getting money from there, or did you mean you're getting money from that community action grant one?
My understanding is that there was some technical assistance money that would be made available to us.
Huh.
I could have misunderstood that, but that's what I was told.
No, that's great. I thought that whole program was on hold.
Well, there's certainly some confusion because I was told the same thing you were, that the program was going to be out about a week ago, and I haven't received any notifications.
Okay, thanks.
But I also know that they're very busy and they had staff turnover, and that everybody is kind of waiting. The governor just signed the housing bill on Friday, I think, and everybody was waiting to see how that played out in everyone's budgets and what it meant for staffing. And I think they're really probably just trying to get their stuff together.
We were told it's coming soon.
Yeah.
But whatever that means. Do we want to back up, Matthew, and go to strategic plan?
Yeah,
How
yeah,
long?
no, yeah,
I
no,
know we're just being mindful of coming on 11:30.
yep, and this was something I just wanted to present to you today. And, you know, I wasn't really looking for any input. We can do that in a follow-up meeting. I was trying to figure out timing for it, and getting a sense of timing. I don't, my intent is to bring it ultimately to a General Assembly meeting, but it seems to me that maybe that's a fall event, and that maybe this whole strategic planning process is geared towards a fall General Assembly event. And if that's something you all think is a good idea, then we'll begin to build a schedule around that, which will be classically Maine, some work done before the 4th of July, and then the rest of it done after Labor Day. And I'm certainly interested in comments on the strategy, but we don't need to do it today. You can also give me your comments in writing.
I think it'd be good if people could pass along comments to Matthew, and I do, at least just thinking about timing perspective and getting it all lined up, that you're right on with the fall timeline makes sense to me.
Great. I will begin putting some more. I'll look for comments over the next week, and then I'll put some more meat on the bones and send this back out for further input. Because the strategic planning process is as much a marketing piece as any other piece as well. It's important that we get people to show up.
Sorry, did you send out like a draft of that? I don't know if I have that. Was that something you sent earlier?
I did.
Okay.
I'm not trusting my technology yet because of the transition from Bill over to me. So I used the executive committee email blast.
Okay.
So you're in there, but
Yeah, it might just be me that I got.
I wouldn't say so yet. not until I see it repeat itself more than once for me. Anyways. So beyond that, I've already touched on, Mark, the TA programs. And there is going to be a new housing assistance funds, and that will require some organization and some collaboration with other folks in the region. So that's a real good opportunity for us to head down. And so I'm kind of excited about that. I wanted to know as well, you know, given where we were with the EDA program, we've requested an extension of the EDA supplemental grant for another 6 months. And I'm waiting to hear on that. That's, once I know that, I will have a pretty good idea of how to build the budget for next year, and the audit. But I have to tell you all, I'm feeling pretty good about what we have in the bank, that it's actually real. And, you know, and I was probably the biggest doubter coming into this, so it's getting more concrete for me. And we've talked about the community engagement piece. I had a couple other things. You should be seeing something from Max on the DOG earmark. We're expecting them to go live any day with a process, and that will receive some further information about how to apply for that process. And we literally, it looks like it might go live on Friday or Saturday.
All right.
That's it for me.
I just had a question about that, Mark, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So is I'm to understand, we have like now we had that process and the money was kind of earmarked, but now there's a formal application process that
Yes.
that we go through as MCOG, or we go through individually to get to you? How does it work? I mean, I guess
We're
that's what
gonna,
we're waiting on.
yeah, we're gonna coordinate that through, Max will be coordinating that through the MCOG process. You know, I would certainly like to stay with that. The way I understand it is that, you know, the grant was given to the region. I don't know yet what the specifics are for how that money is supposed to be run through, whether it can run through us or whether it needs to run through one municipality first and then spread out. But Max will be working with all the communities to ensure their participation. The only thing that was weird in all that, and again, I'm just repeating emails that I've read, was that he doesn't expect body cams to be covered in the grant, but he does expect the software for body cams to be covered. Just hit us both as being kind of weird. So stay tuned.
Julie,
Yeah, my understanding for this grant was that it was anticipated to be a competitive grant for the region. It came to the region and that we would all have opportunity to compete for those funds, and that none of the funds were earmarked within the region. Is that correct?
I'm not going to answer that question because I don't really understand what happened in the process before it. I know that a number of communities participated in a very quick process and got their requests in, and that built the foundation of the grant. But until I see what they come back with from the Department of Justice, I really can't answer that question. I do expect it to be a very fast turnaround.
Mark, what was your understanding of that process? Because my understanding was that it was for the purpose of grant writing, not for the purpose of earmarking funds.
For as far as how the process would play out, I don't know that
Yes,
I've had a good understanding throughout the entire you know, exactly how it was going to play out. And I think we were waiting on some element of rules making that there'd be some parts, some components of that would likely be out of the organization's hands, depending on what ties there were to that. I mean, the requests for anybody who's, you know, participated in this latest bit of process, like you don't really get much of that upfront identification of how those funds can then be subbed out to you know, other municipalities as part of a regional effort, or how they can be used otherwise. So I think we need to have the information back from Department of Justice or wherever the funds are coming from before we can completely speak to that.
And I think that's an important piece to start with, is you're putting in an earmark for a request of a program. When they do the earmark, that's when they target what program it's going to go through. And then we respond to that program and the requirements of that program. I mean, that's generally a big picture earmark process. So we need to see what DOG is looking for and how that plays out.
No, I understand all that. The question is whether the funds are earmarked to particular communities within the region already. And my understanding was this was going to be a competitive program that all of us would have opportunity to apply to. And I'm hearing something different today, and I want to make sure my understanding is correct.
Well, I want to make clear that I'm not answering that question until I know
Yeah.
more about the program and
Yeah,
how it's.
fair enough. If you could look into that, that would be great.
Yep.
And Sally, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I just, Brunswick was part of that original request. And I will say that, I mean, probably many of us have put in these earmarks, and we are specific about what it goes to in those, right? When we do it through our respective towns, but we are clearly a collective. But there were components of like who needed what, and we had budgets and everything. And I know that our our departments have been in touch with the delegation. So, I mean, during the process, so they know exactly what we were looking for.
Yeah.
And so that was part of the request. Was a certain budget, certain amount, and a scope of work.
And I do remember that, Sally, was that there were communities that provided feedback, Brunswick being one of them. And I think I remember a conversation of Max also, building in, but Matt, how about you review with Max, see what we hear from the federal government, and then we'll know better moving forward.
Yeah,
Stay
I think
tuned.
go ahead.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, I think there was some built in for other communities that didn't respond because not everybody, it was kind of a fast turnaround. So I think Max did build the budget to have, a certain amount for other communities too, that weren't like specific to what they needed.
I think we're gonna know soon enough. And, your input's all very helpful. We'll put something together and get it out to you as soon as we're clear.
Anything
How about those
else?
Red Sox?
I don't know, the Yankees won 5 in a row.
Matt, you have anything else in?
I do not.
Okay. I think a real quick other business, unless we want to turn it longer, I don't think we've set a nominations committee yet for the next slate. And I know it's kind of challenging with the bylaws in flux. But we had what, canceled last month's board or executive committee. So I don't know if we want to set one now. It's still in the purview of the executive committee currently to set a nominations committee. Usually we pick one person who's here and 3 people who are not, or 2 people who are not, to participate in that process. I don't know if that needs to be a formal adoption of the nominations committee, and looking for a reminder from you, Audra, or anybody else.
Yeah, I think that we have to vote on members or volunteers.
Do we have any volunteers in the room today?
Oh,
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate that. I'm also, as the absent-minded chair who forgot to think about the nominations committee when doing agendas, is happy to participate in that process. And it would love a third. And we can probably do it over Zoom and hopefully keep it quick and painless. Although in conversations, we do need to find somebody who likes the idea of being a treasurer. Do I have a third? Oh, Nicole, thank you for hopping in. Okay, so have a nominations committee of myself, Amber, and Nicole. Take a motion to approve.
approved.
Second. All in favor. Excellent. Thank you. And Nicole and Amber, I'll send something reaching out, and we can get our tasks in a roll and move that forward. Anything else?
Thank you again to Amber and Nicole for jumping in. My goodness. Yes.
Take a motion to adjourn.
This will help me actually learn who everybody is, being so new. So moved.
Second. All in favor. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Yep, bye-bye.
Brian, good luck with the rest of the recovery.
Mm.